So thank you all for joining this presentation in the series of the Leiden-Delft-Erasmus Center for Sustainability Circular Industries talks. Today we have with us Roelof Stam, who's a researcher at the Clingendael International Energy Program. And he will be talking about the role of ammonia in the energy transition. Thank you for joining us, Roelof. And yeah, without further ado, I would just like to give you the floor.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation, René. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Roelof Stam, and I'm a researcher at the Clingendael International Energy Program. Clingendael International Energy Program is a think tank focused on international energy market developments, energy geopolitics, and energy transition related questions. And well, CIEP was founded about 20 years ago by our current director, Kobe van der Linden. And the initial focus of our think tank was to do research on energy security and energy market developments. And currently we've added to this focus also a lot of research on energy transition related questions, of which this paper is an example. So I have been working at CIEP for about 2 years now. And before I started as a researcher at CIEP, I followed the master program Complex System Engineering at Delft University of Technology, where I followed the energy track. And well, I recently published a paper on ammonia. And the intention of this piece was to investigate how we can use the existing infrastructure, knowledge and expertise from the fertilizer sector as a launching pad for ammonia's role in the energy sector. And well, I'm very excited to share some of the results with you guys today. And I'm also very curious to hear your thoughts on this topic. So I think we have some time for discussion afterwards, and I'm looking forward to that as well. I'm going to put on my pointer so you can follow what I'm trying to convey. So the title of the research is Relaunching Ammonia from Fertilizer to Energy Carrier in Northwest Europe. And we called it Relaunching Ammonia because ammonia already has been launched in the fertilizer sector about 100 years ago. And it might be relaunched on a significant scale in the energy sector as well in the future. And yeah, so these are the 5 topics that I would like to discuss with you guys today. First of all, I would like to go into the ammonia supply chain in the industry, what it looks like currently, ammonia as a potential overseas energy carrier, and what type of role the current terminals in the region might play, ammonia as a potential role in energy storage, and also ammonia's direct use as a low carbon fuel I would like to discuss. And lastly, I would like to get back to the supply chain and basically look how these new use cases affect the supply chain and what it means for the existing players in the market. So the current supply chain in Northwest Europe, currently almost all the ammonia in the region is produced using methane. This ammonia is used to produce a variety of fertilizers. Some of these fertilizers also need carbon dioxide, such as urea, which is captured in the ammonia production process. And some of the captured carbon dioxide in the ammonia production process is also sold to completely different industries that use it for completely different purposes, such as beer brewing, but also horticulture or carbonization of soft drinks. Yeah, about 80% of the ammonia that is produced and also imported in the region is used to produce fertilizers. And the remaining 20% is used for completely different applications, such as the production of textiles, but also the production of explosives, and AdBlue, which is a substance we use in our diesel engines to decrease the NOx emissions, the nitrogen oxide emissions that come from our tailpipes. And well, AdBlue is simply a combination of urea with water. Well, this helps us to decrease the nitrogen oxide emissions, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. Yeah, so this is the current ammonia supply chain in a nutshell. Of course, it's a simplified version, but it's yeah, about what it looks like right now. I would now like to briefly go into the ammonia industry in our region. So here on the left, you see the ammonia plants in Northwest Europe. We have a substantial ammonia production capacity in the region. However, we have experienced extremely high gas prices the last couple of years, as I think all of you will be familiar with. Here on the right, we see the natural gas prices in the region of the last 3 years, with an enormous peak in 2022 in August. And this has had a drastic effect on the production capacity of ammonia in the region, because natural gas is a very important part of this production process. So what happened? In 2022, CIEP Fertilizers announced they were closing their ammonia factory in Inns. Not a lot later, BASF announced that they would close one of their flagship ammonia production facilities in Ludwigshafen, also drastically reducing the production capacity over there. And lastly, CIEP Fertilizers announced that they were closing their Billingham factory as well. So what we see is that a once mighty UK ammonia production capacity is not as mighty as it used to be, and this has led to some interesting newspaper articles. I would like to share one of the headlines. Beer shortages and pig pileups, fertilizer crisis rattles European food chain. So what happened over here? CIEP Fertilizers decided to close down their ammonia factories, which meant they also didn't produce any carbon dioxide anymore. And CIEP Fertilizers is one of the biggest carbon dioxide suppliers in that region. The connected industries were in need of a new carbon source. And they had a lot of difficulty finding new carbon sources because CIEP Fertilizers was such a big supplier of this feedstock. What this shows to me is that these industrial clusters are very much interconnected, and a change in one industry can have drastic effects has a drastic effect in completely different industries. And I think it's very important, especially as we are going through an energy transition, that we have a very good understanding of these interconnections in these industrial clusters to make sure that no unexpected negative events happen. So this is the permanent reduction that we've seen over the couple of years in the ammonia sector. However, in August 2022, during the peak of the gas prices, more than 70% of the ammonia production capacity was temporarily curtailed. Here on the right, we see the monthly index of production in the volume of fertilizers and nitrogen compounds. And the yellow line represents 2022. And we see that in August, the production of fertilizers and nitrogen compounds reduced by 23%, which is, of course, a significant reduction. However, it's not close to the 70% ammonia production capacity that was curtailed in the same month. And one of the reasons why we're still able to produce so much nitrogen fertilizers in this month is because we were able to import ammonia. And well, this brings me also to the next slide. So the global infrastructure and overseas ammonia trade. Worldwide, there are 200 terminals with the capability to import or export ammonia. And well, about 20 megaton is traded on a yearly basis. And this existing infrastructure, which you also see here on the left on the slide, and also the demand in the fertilizer sector for ammonia are very important reasons why currently 85% of the hydrogen export projects look at ammonia as a carrier. Here on the right, we see the top ammonia exporting and importing regions in 2019. The European Union is the biggest importer in the region by a landslide. And this is also a bridge to the next slide. So ammonia terminals in Northwest Europe, because we are the biggest importer of ammonia in the world, we also have a substantial ammonia import capacity in this region. Well, the terminals are shown here on the left. And if we are going to use ammonia on a large scale to transport energy overseas, this import capacity will need to increase. And I just wanted to get a feeling for the orders of magnitude. So I did a back on the envelope calculation. It's not meant to be super accurate, just to get a feeling for the size. And I used the 10 megaton hydrogen import target of the EU as an example. In this calculation, I assumed that 85% of this import target would need to be imported in the form of ammonia, because currently 85% of the hydrogen projects look at ammonia as a carrier. And I came to the conclusion that the import volumes of ammonia would need to increase with a factor 14 before 2030, which is, of course, an enormous increase over a very short amount of time. I mean, 2030 is around the corner. And there are some very obvious obstacles. First of all, the permitting process, which is notoriously slow in this region, but also safety issues. If you're going to increase the import volumes by a factor 14 of ammonia in the region, the safety issues that you're going to experience are completely different from the safety issues that we are currently experiencing in these terminals. Also, simply space constraints. Many of the harbors in Northwest Europe already struggle with space constraints, with space limitations, and increasing the import volumes of ammonia by such a degree will, of course, add to the space issues that we experience. And yeah, part of the solution, it's a bit of an open door, but I think it's important to mention, is repurposing all the infrastructure. Starting off with seeing if we can expand the current terminals that we have in the region. We see that expanding current terminals have way shorter lead times because of various reasons. But one of the reasons is that you already have many of the permits that you need in place, making it way easier to expand the capacity. Also, repurposing old LNG or LPG infrastructure might be interesting, although we will be needing LPG and LNG for quite some time still in our economy. Maybe over the years, we can see if we can start repurposing some of this infrastructure as well. The import volume of ammonia and having the capacity to import such volumes is one piece of the puzzle. And I think the other piece of the puzzle is whether the targeted volumes are even available on the world market in 2030. And we believe that it's highly unlikely that these types of volumes will be available in 2030 on world markets. Hydrogen Europe estimates that about 5 megaton will be available for European markets in 2030, but they estimate this in an optimistic scenario. And I think it's important to note that this is an optimistic scenario. If you look at the latest hydrogen report by the IEA, they indicate, or they estimate that about 4 to 5% of the current hydrogen export projects have taken a final investment decision, which is not a lot, especially if you look at the enormous enormously high ambitions that we have for hydrogen import. I think it just shows how big the gap is between policy ambitions on one hand and the reality on the other, and how big of a bridge there's still to be made in order to bridge this gap. So, yeah, one of the first questions you will have to answer if you're going to import ammonia for the energy sector is what you're going to do with it. Are you going to crack it in the port area where it's brought ashore? Are you going to convert it only later in the supply chain, or are you not going to convert it at all? And I think currently the dominant narrative is that we will convert most of it in the port areas. I think there are some very good arguments to be made why this is smart. First of all, economies of scale, but also the available infrastructure in the port areas, and the fact that a lot of the demand is of course localized in the port areas. However, we believe that it's also interesting to see if we can convert some of the ammonia later in the supply chain. We believe there are some good reasons why it might be interesting to convert later in the supply chain or not at all. First of all, strategic reasons of countries that are located in the hinterland of Europe. For example, Germany, who doesn't have that much access to big seaports, might, especially after the shock they experienced in 2022 during the energy crisis, they might want to own more of the critical energy infrastructure themselves. So we could imagine that they might want to have their own conversion facilities. They might want to have their own ammonia storage facilities. So simply for security of supply and strategic reasons, it might be interesting to convert later on in the supply chain. Also, space constraints at or nearby the harbors. The TNO did an interesting study, I think a year ago, and they investigated how much space would be needed in the port of Rotterdam if the Port of Rotterdam was to be importing a lot of hydrogen for the German economy in the form of ammonia, how much space they would need to convert it all. And they came to the conclusion that there was simply not enough space in the Port of Rotterdam to convert all this hydrogen that the German industry might need, especially as long as the fossil fuel infrastructure is still in place. Which is also a reason why converting later on in the supply chain might be necessary. And also ammonia transportation and storage is often easier due to the higher volumetric energy density. And lastly, in some cases, ammonia can be used directly in the fertilizer sector, but also as a direct fuel. And in these cases, it might be preferred to use ammonia directly so that you can skip the energy penalty that comes with conversion to hydrogen. I would now like to briefly go into some direct uses of ammonia, starting with ammonia storage. Currently, the spotlight is, I believe, if we talk about long-term storage for the future, the spotlight is on hydrogen salt caverns. I think for good reasons. Hydrogen salt caverns have a lot of potential to play a big role in solving our energy storage needs of the future. However, I think there are some issues. First of all, many of the salt caverns that we currently use for storing natural gas aren't applicable, aren't usable for hydrogen salt or hydrogen storage. And besides that, hydrogen has 1/3 the energy density of methane under every pressure, which means that there is just significantly less storage capacity in the form of hydrogen in these salt caverns. And as we are in need of enormous amounts of storage capacity in the future, we think it's also interesting to look at ammonia storage tanks as an additional solution. First of all, ammonia storage tanks are already installed in many different countries around the world. There are various companies that are certified to do this safely, and the operation and maintenance of these storage units is quite straightforward. Also, one ammonia storage tank stores about 50,000 tons of ammonia. This is a big cooled storage tank, which equals about 260 gigawatt hours of energy. And one hydrogen salt cavern stores about 6,000 to 9,000 tons of hydrogen, which equals about 200 to 300 gigawatts hours of energy. So the orders of magnitude are very similar between an ammonia storage tank and a hydrogen salt cavern. This is something which was quite a revelation for me. It's a very simple calculation, of course, but intuitively, I would have thought that a hydrogen salt cavern would store way more energy than an ammonia storage tank, but that's not the case. And it also makes these ammonia storage tanks extra interesting as an additional solution, in my opinion. I always like to share this example. A Tesla Model S battery stores about 100 kilowatt hours of energy. This means that you need 2.6 million batteries to store as much energy as you should store in one ammonia storage tank. Which is huge, of course, and just shows what type of orders of magnitude we're talking about. And one of the biggest arguments against ammonia tank storage is, of course, safety. And safety is, I think, a very important aspect. Ammonia is a very toxic substance, and especially in a densely populated area such as the Netherlands, safety needs to be taken very seriously. However, I always like to show this graph when we talk about safety and ammonia. This is the US ammonia network here on the right, where they have 5,000 kilometers of pipelines and more than 10,000 storage facilities scattered throughout the country. Many of these storage facilities are small-scale, decentralized local storage facilities, which are localized or located on farmland of individual farmers. In the United States, farmers use ammonia directly on the land, where we in Europe do another conversion step. Before we use it as a fertilizer, they use it directly. And that explains this decentralized ammonia storage network in this country. However, besides small-scale decentralized facilities, they also have some large-scale centralized facilities near densely populated areas, near Houston, but also near LA, which isn't shown in this map, unfortunately. It will be around here, approximately. I think this shows that safety is also, in a sense, a matter of perspective. And the perspective of the United States is, as it is often, or as it is sometimes at least, a little different from the perspective of the Europeans. And well, I'm not here to give a value judgment. I do think it's interesting for the European policymakers to talk with their American colleagues and see how they handle the safety issues that come with large-scale ammonia storage. Ammonia can also be stored underground. However, this isn't happening on a very large scale in the world. I don't want to say too much about it, but if people are interested in ammonia storage underground, I have a slide. We can talk about it during the discussion. Ammonia as a fuel. For many applications, ammonia is definitely not the fuel first choice due to its toxicity, but also its challenging combustion characteristics. Ammonia has a very high ignition temperature. It also has a slow burning velocity, which makes it difficult to use as a fuel. It also makes it difficult to explode, which is an advantage when you're transporting it. However, it's also difficult to burn, which makes it difficult in a combustion environment. And yeah, if you don't burn it completely, you have to deal with various emissions, such as ammonia slip, but also nitrogen oxide. And although these are engineering problems, they're solvable theoretically. Yeah, this technology, burning ammonia, is still quite immature, and more research is necessary to optimize the burning environment for ammonia. Yeah, in many cases, simply better alternatives are available than ammonia as a fuel. However, it is regarded as a very promising fuel for ships and possibly also for power plants to deliver flexible supply. The first ships are expected to enter our waters in the coming years, the first pilot projects. And when we talk about power plants running on ammonia, I think most interesting work is currently happening in Japan. Japan is an island, and they expect to need to import a lot of energy to fulfill their needs in the future, just as they're doing now. And they expect a lot of this energy to come in the form of ammonia, especially in the first decade. And yeah, that's why they're looking to see if they can retrofit their existing power fleets, their existing gas and coal-fired power plants, to co-fire ammonia, with the goal to eventually build retrofits that they can burn on ammonia completely. Yeah, so if you're interested in power plants running on ammonia, then Japan is the place to be. There is the place where most interesting research is happening right now. I would now like to briefly go into these two applications, but then in the context of Northwest Europe. So ammonia is a low carbon fuel in the Northwest European maritime bunker sector. Here on the left, we see the current global bunker market. So this is the bunker market for fossil fuels. And we see that the ARA region plays a very big role in this bunker market. And we believe that Rotterdam, especially, is very well positioned to continue an important role in global bunker markets, so also in low carbon bunker markets such as ammonia, for similar reasons, because it's strategically positioned along major trade routes, but also the fact that there is just a lot of trade happening in the area, the fact that we have a large energy cluster, are a couple of the various reasons why Rotterdam is an interesting place for ammonia bunkering as well. However, it remains to be seen how the ports in Northwest Europe, such as Rotterdam, will compare with bunkering ports that have similar advantages, but also have access to cheap renewable energy and can produce cheap renewable fuels such as ammonia. And yeah, I would like to share this analysis here on the left. This is a techno-economic analysis of a potential future ammonia bunker market. This is not done by us, by the way. It's a different researcher, but I like to use this to make this point. Based on a techno-economic optimum, on an optimum bunker market for ammonia based on low costs, taking into account the major trade routes, Europe simply doesn't have a place for a bunker market because we are not the low-cost supplier. According to this analysis, Yemen is an interesting place to bunker your ship. Yeah, this might be interesting based on low-cost analysis, but if you think about geopolitics, this might not be the most interesting place to tank big ships. Also, the Suez Canal is seen as a potential bunker port. I think this is more reasonable, especially as NEOM, the big Saudi Arabia project, where they're going to produce a lot of ammonia, is close to the Suez Canal entrance. This might be an interesting place to tank ammonia in the future. Yeah, so this on the left is an economic optimum, and I think you can say with certainty that the bunker market won't look exactly like this, but it's a nice starting point to get a feeling where you can potentially produce and bunker cheap ammonia in the future. However, in addition to techno-economic considerations, also government intervention, geopolitics, and many other developments have an influence on how a market like this takes shape. In my opinion, I think Europe still definitely has a big role to play in the bunker market in the future. But it still remains to be seen how big this role will be and how they will eventually compare with the other bunker ports in the world. So ammonia as a low carbon fuel in the Northwest European power sector. Here on the left, we see the percentage of coal-fired power capacity in Northwest Europe by age. And more than 20% of the coal-fired power plants is younger than half their life expectancy. Here on the right, we see percentage of gas-fired power capacity in Northwest Europe by age. And more than 50% is younger than 20 years. So we don't have the youngest power fleet in the world. There are countries in Asia that have way younger power fleets than we have in this part of the world. However, we believe that there's still substantial part of coal and gas-fired power plants in this region that are relatively young and are therefore also potentially interesting candidates to be retrofitted, to be used to burn low-carbon fuels such as ammonia and hydrogen. And I think currently the focus, at least in the Netherlands, is mainly on hydrogen co-firing. I think there is not one gas-fired power plant in the Netherlands that doesn't have some sort of plan to do something with hydrogen in the future. And I think it makes sense to look at hydrogen if you're also expected to produce a lot of hydrogen locally. However, taking the Netherlands again as an example, the Dutch government published the policy report, Nationaal Plan Energiesysteem, last year, which is an interesting and I think well-written report, in which they indicate that they expect that renewable electricity will be scarce in the region for at least the coming decade. And they also indicate that they want to focus on direct electrification as long as renewable electricity is scarce. Yeah, I think you can say a lot about that, but one of the things it probably means is that hydrogen production in our region will come on a second place. And if hydrogen production comes on a second place, we might need to import more molecules in order to fulfill our energy needs. And these molecules are expected to come in the form of ammonia predominantly, especially in the first decade. And if you're importing a lot of ammonia and you're not producing that much hydrogen regionally, in this case, it might make sense to see if you can convert some of these power plants to run on ammonia instead of hydrogen, in order to skip the energy penalty. A little bit like what Japan is doing with their research. However, currently in Europe, the REACH regulation, which is an EU regulation that regulates safe usage of dangerous chemicals, is a barrier to large-scale use of ammonia in the power sector. And we believe that if we are serious about ammonia's role in the energy sector of the future, that we will need to find a balance between safety on one hand and environmental protection on one hand, and the benefits that we could get from ammonia in energy on the other hand. That's it, what I wanted to say on ammonia in the power sector in the EU. I would like to briefly come back to the supply chain now. This is the supply chain as we discussed in the beginning. What it looks like right now. Well, on the supply side, we expect a lot more import of ammonia in the future. Unfortunately, this will also probably mean we will have less production of ammonia in our region, simply because our producers are not able to compete with the low-cost ammonia flows coming from overseas. We might still have some production using methane and CCS, maybe some production with renewable electricity, but it will probably mean we will have less carbon dioxide produced in this industry, which means that industries that are currently connected, buying their carbon dioxide from the fertilizer producers, will need to go and look for other cheap sources of CO2. And if they can't find them, then they might need to move their business elsewhere. Yeah, that's it on the supply side. On the demand side, there are many interesting applications, some of which we've just discussed. However, it remains to be seen how big ammonia will eventually be in the energy sector. I think no one can say with certainty what type of volumes we can expect coming from the energy sector. However, I think you can say with certainty that this market is going to change drastically. We will have new players on the supply side. We will have new players on the demand side. And yeah, the business landscape is changing drastically, and I think that existing ammonia producers, existing fertilizer producers in the region will need to reinvent themselves to still be meaningful and valuable in the changing business landscape. We can, for example, imagine that ammonia producers, fertilizer producers that are located at the coast, they might eventually decide to quit producing ammonia because they simply can't compete. They might expand their import terminals and start to completely focus on importing ammonia. Possibly they will still produce fertilizers at this location, but they might also start to supply ammonia to the energy sector. And this way reinvent themselves to still be of value in this new market. I can also imagine that producers that are located inland that don't have access to world markets will have a way more difficult time to reinvent themselves because they don't have the access to world ammonia flows. I think I would like to leave it at that. If you're interested in the changing ammonia supply chain, if you're interested in what it means for the current players and how the market it might change in the future, then I would recommend to read our last chapter of this paper, chapter 6. And for now, I would like to thank you all for your attention. I hope it was a clear story, and I hope it was interesting for you guys. I think it's a very broad topic, ammonia in energy. It's also a very complicated topic, and I definitely don't know everything about this topic. So I'm also very curious to hear your ideas on this topic. And I think it's time for discussion now. René, what do you think?
Yes, thank you, Roelof, for a very nice overview of the potential role of ammonia in our energy system. I think it's very interesting, and there's lots of points for discussion, I'd say. So the floor is open for questions. So either just raise your virtual hand so I can give you the floor, or type something in the chat. That is also possible, of course. I will keep an eye on that. And there is already one question in the chat, I see, Roelof, by Torsten, who says, how do you see incineration of ammonia in relation to nitrogen emission issues?
Sorry, what does incineration mean?
Burning.
Sorry? Burning.
Burning.
In relation to nitrogen emissions. Yeah, that's an issue, Torsten, definitely. I think it's a very good question. That is one of the big issues with burning ammonia, especially in the Netherlands, where we have every extra nitrogen oxide emission is one too much. Every extra ammonia molecule lost is one too much in the atmosphere. And that's exactly one of the biggest issues with burning ammonia, is to solve these issues. However, as burning a fossil fuel and carbon emissions is a thermodynamic inevitability. You can't burn a fossil fuel without producing carbon emissions. Burning an ammonia molecule without nitrogen emissions, at least without problematic nitrogen emissions like nitrogen oxide, is possible. However, we still need to do a lot of research to make these burners be able to burn ammonia in a way that we don't have any NOx emissions. But yeah, I think it's a good question. But it's an issue with every fuel that you burn. It doesn't matter if it's hydrogen, diesel. All fuels emit nitrogen oxide when you burn them, and when they were not burned correctly. So it's an issue we have to solve, and it doesn't really matter which fuel we use. But it's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's I'm not sure whether everybody's familiar with that, but if you burn anything, let's say at high temperatures, you will always produce with air, let's say, then you will always produce nitrogen or NOx or things like that, and you can prevent that and as much as possible. You can try to clean it up afterwards, but there will always be some production of these NOx, since there is 80% of nitrogen in the air basically, and if you heat it up,
it's just because of the air, because the air gets hot, basically, you get nitrogen oxide emissions. So you have to do something You could, some solutions are, for example, to use pure oxygen, or I mean, there are many solutions. I could share some articles if you're interested. This is hasn't been the focus of my paper, but I have read something about it, so I could share them with you, Torsten, if you're interested afterwards.
I have a question myself about well, first of all, it seems, and you also tend to start from that, and I've also seen another report a couple of years ago by TNO, with actually some Leiden colleagues that basically stated, well, the energy transition will come with a lot of safety risks, and then when you dig into that, that is all related to the transport of ammonia. So they basically see the use of ammonia as a transport medium for hydrogen, basically, as an inevitability. Difficult word. So it's inevitable to use ammonia to transport hydrogen. How inevitable is it actually? Because of course you can also transport hydrogen. So why is ammonia so important in this?
Yeah, I think it's not an inevitability, to be honest. I mean, we can do it. We can do it in many different ways, transporting energy. Ammonia just seems to be in many situations the low cost solution. So the reason why we want to use ammonia is not because we want to transport energy over land. It's mostly because we want to transport energy from energy rich areas, and the future energy rich areas are areas where we have a lot of sun and wind energy for cheap prices. Basically, we want to transport that energy, for example, from let's take Namibia to Europe, and we want to use we want to transport that energy to Europe, and we can't do that via electrons. We need to make a molecule out of this energy in order to be able to transport it overseas. And then hydrogen is an obvious molecule to convert it to. However, hydrogen doesn't have the energy density that is necessary to transport it over long distances. You can cool it to 253 degrees, minus 250 degrees, and then it's a liquid. However, this costs a lot of energy, and it's just not really. It seems to be a very difficult solution in the end. An easier solution is to convert the ammonia to hydrogen to ammonia by basically connecting a nitrogen molecule to the hydrogen molecule, and this way you package the hydrogen more efficiently and have gives you a higher volumetric energy density, which makes it easier to transport. And
so it's basically what you're saying is it's basically needed if you want to transport, let's say, cheap solar energy over very large distances. Then it becomes from an economic perspective the most interesting choice.
There are of course other choices, but
I think that if you look at Europe, for example, you could argue that, well, there's a lot of interest now in transporting hydrogen through pipelines from, let's say, the west coast of Africa, where there's plenty of sunshine, plenty of desert available to produce a lot of hydrogen, actually, and that would probably not be transported in the form of ammonia yet, because pipelines are then probably the cheapest option, right?
It depends. I think you are right. When you look at it from a cost analysis, I think that's right. Then it's probably more convenient to convert it or to transport it via pipelines. But we see, for example, that the project, I'm not sure what the project is called, but we see a project happening currently in Spain, if I recall correctly, and they want to produce hydrogen to sell to the Northwest European market. But France is not agreeing on building a pipeline with them, so they are still going to convert this hydrogen to ammonia to ship around France to the port of Rotterdam to get the molecules here. So you see, even though technologically speaking, it is the best solution to just use a pipeline and transport hydrogen, if countries say no, then it doesn't work. So that's a big issue. You can also see that for high voltage DC power lines, France will not allow them to run from Spain to Northwest Europe. I mean, that's just. I mean, in fact, it's just silly, right? I mean, and if we are going to act as Europe as a whole in this whole geopolitical context where we have a lot of competition from both the US and China, we'd better work together, right? I mean, but anyways, I mean, that's not something that we can change overnight, but it is something that, well, if you think about the European energy system, is something that we should really discuss. So I think that's really, I can see that issue.
I also had a question about the incineration or the burning of ammonia, let's say, in power plants. So basically, you're mixing it with in coal-fired power plants or in gas-fired power plants. Of course, you can already see that regular power plants already have problems in more and more, let's say, time periods. They have problems to compete, let's say, with cheap marginal zero-cost renewables. If you add on complex stuff like having ammonia being burned or CCS or whatever, it makes it more expensive, makes this competition only more problematic. So from an economic perspective, you probably are not going to make a lot of money if you're going to make your power plant more complex. So this can only probably happen with a lot of government subsidies, I guess.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. This is not a cheap solution. I mean, burning ammonia in the power plant is a very valuable molecule, and burning it is actually a very low valuable application, to be honest. And yeah, if you compare it to gas-fired power plants, you're going to be way more expensive. I'm not sure what exactly the difference in price are, but and also the estimates of ammonia pricing in the future, they vary very much between researchers, but. Yeah, I think it's going to be a lot more expensive. It needs to be subsidized, but also, I mean, having flexible supply being valued enough in an energy-only market like we have right now is also a problem in general, right? I mean, so maybe capacity mechanisms could help, but definitely subsidizing subsidies will be needed in order to get this market going. Otherwise, it's not gonna run. To be honest, yeah.
Yeah,
it's gonna be more expensive.
Yeah, and then you get to the broader perspective of what would a renewable energy system or largely renewable energy system actually look like, and to what extent do we need these stationary power sources as we are used to. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do, of course, with flexibility and demand also, which is much cheaper than all these options of keeping fixed power basically or base load power, let's say, available through large scale power plants. So there, well, then it becomes a really complex discussion about what
I mean,
the future
you can do
of the energy
also
system
things
will look like, right? Yeah.
True, but also you can do, of course, you can do many things. You can do things with the grid, making the grid connections better so that we're more connected in Europe. You can do a lot with energy, with demand response. But I personally still think that in every situation we will need some form of flexible supply. But the question is whether you want to use ammonia for that, or maybe just a gas with CCS or other solutions might be more applicable. But it also very much depends on the political landscape. What do we want as society? It's not only what technologically speaking is the best way to go.
Yeah,
I think there are.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. Basically, so could you please detail on the large share of ammonia you assume in the mix of low carbon energy carriers such as liquid hydrogen, LOHCs, and methanol, etc. So indeed, a good question. So how does ammonia compare to these other types of
that's an excellent
carriers?
question, actually. Yeah. Well, what we see is what I find interesting. We have discussions with the ministry a lot as well. They're also busy with this question: which carrier is the one that we want to have in Europe, if in the Netherlands? What is most ideal regarding safety, cost, etc. And they're doing very elaborate studies. But I also believe, to be honest, that especially as the Netherlands itself, we are not completely we don't have complete ownership of which carriers we're gonna get in this region. I think it also really depends on what the export projects are gonna do in the rest of the world. And we see that many of the export projects, as I showed in one of the slides, 85% of the current export projects focuses on ammonia, and this is for various reasons. This has to do with a favorable energy density. This has to do with favorable costs, especially if you transport over long distances. But this also really has to do, in my opinion, not only with infrastructure, because infrastructure is not even that much of the eventual costs, but but more so with demand security, because this market is so unsure. If you're gonna set up projects for LOHC or something else, which there isn't really a big market for yet, it makes it the suppliers need some sort of demand security, and I think the fertilizer sector currently can function in a sense for this demand security, making it a less risky investment. So I think that at least in the coming years, the coming decade or so, we will predominantly see ammonia projects being set up. But I can imagine that in the future, these various carriers will coexist. They will have various different applications. Methanol has a slightly different application than ammonia. LOHC can have a slightly different application than ammonia or methanol. And just as we have natural gas, crude oil, various oil products, I believe that we can also have various carriers existing next to each other in the future. I hope that answers your question, Martijn.
Yes, thanks a lot.
And yeah, what's the view on future price developments of ammonia? To be honest, I have no clue. Prices are one of the biggest uncertainty in this whole question revolving around future fuels. And yeah, no, I can't say too much about it. The only thing I can say about it is that the predictions are vary enormously between the various research institutes. And yeah, I don't know what the future price developments will be of ammonia. To be honest. If people would have a good feeling about this, then it would be way easier to set up projects than we see right now.
And you would become really rich very soon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, yeah, I think it's one of the biggest issues which withholds many of the big projects. So as I said during the presentation, about 4 or 5% of the export projects that have been announced have taken an FID. I think if we knew what type of, if we had a good feeling of the price developments, this would be completely different. I think this is one of the big uncertainties that is makes people hesitant to invest in this market.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Roelof. I think this was a very interesting talk. We often talk about things like metals and stocks and things like that in this group. But I think it's really nice to have this perspective of what kind of energy carrier you would choose in a renewable energy system and the role that ammonia can play in that. I think it's I think it's really nice, and I was kind of taken by surprise by this report I just mentioned by TNO and some of our Leiden colleagues that basically said that the energy transition will cause a lot of additional safety risks, and that was connected directly to the ammonia, trains and pipelines and everything that's connected to that. I think you made a nice point in showing that in the US, at least the perspective is different. People look at this differently simply because they're used to having ammonia storage in many places. Now, when I look at your map of the US, I think, well, it's probably a lot less densely populated than the Netherlands, for example.
100%.
And that makes a huge difference, I think. But I think it's interesting, and we don't really know where this will be where this will be going. But I think there is a role for ammonia to play, and but I'm not as sure that it will be as big a role as is now being predicted, because I think the safety issues will, and especially in densely populated Europe, I think will be a huge issue and also with the safety regulation that we have.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I also think sometimes the predictions are a little bit they oversimplify the safety risks that come with ammonia. But I also want to add to that we as society are able to deal with big safety risk in a very good way, as we see as we see with, for example, nuclear power, which isn't of course always the case, but generally speaking, we are able to deal with very big risk in a very good manner, and I think we could do that with ammonia as well. But I do agree, you don't want to have enormous amounts of ammonia stored near densely populated areas, because the safety risks are just too high. I think we can definitely agree on that.
It's a discussion we need to have. Where do we want to have it, if we want to have it, and how widely distributed do we want to have it as well? Thanks, Roelof. I think this was really nice. Thank you for joining us today. I don't see any further I don't see any further questions, so thanks for your presentation, and I hope to see you all during the next Circular Industries Talks.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay. Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.